Welcome to the Divorce and Real Estate Podcast, where we navigate the complex intersection of divorce and property.
Our mission is to provide crucial insights, expert advice, and empathetic support for those facing divorce and real estate decisions.
Each episode will provide you insight into the specific challenges and opportunities available
for your real estate during the divorce process,
along with expert advice from leading professionals in the field. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kristyn Carmichael. I am a licensed Arizona attorney, certified divorce financial analyst. Yes, it's a mouthful. We just refer to it as CDFA, and a professional mediator. I am the founder of Couple Solutions Center, where we help couples go through their divorce and premarital process here in Phoenix, Arizona.
And I'm Asher Cohen, founder of BUYAZRE at Realty Group. I'm the local real estate agent helping you navigate the waters of real estate and making sure that you understand what's going on, when it's going on, and the options that you have available to you. Thanks for joining us today.
So, Asher and I met up and decided that we should do this series because personally, helping couples for almost 10 years with the divorce process, I see that there's a huge gap in the knowledge around divorce and real estate. So a couple of reasons of why it's super important. So first, people are really, really overwhelmed because this is one of the most challenging times in their life. And that means they're trying to keep their heads above water, move through the emotional turmoil of a divorce, and also try and figure out everything that they're going to be doing. And so it's completely normal that people are overwhelmed with their emotions and everything that they have to do. And the last thing on their mind is to handle their house. And so someone that I always bring onto my team with my clients is Asher to really go over those pieces with my clients while they're working through the process. What does it look like to sell their house? What does it look like to rent? What are creative options for keeping their house? But really educating people so they know what their options are rather than feeling like they are limited in their options or they don't know what to do.
Love that. And I think why this really works well between the two of us is personally, I'm always told like I have such a high patience tolerance. Like clients are always like, you have so much patience. Your wife must just love you. And I definitely have more patience in the business sometimes than at home for sure. But I think, we understand as real estate professionals that we're usually being called upon when a life event is happening. And in this case, divorce or separation. And there's a lot that goes into that emotionally for our clients. And we really do empathize with them, and we go slow on their pace. And we want to make sure that clients know that we're not just out there looking for the next quick sale and we're moving on. I mean, yes, we're definitely in this to transact, but the main purpose is to be there for our clients. And the way we're there is definitely patience and making sure that their options are in front of them, all of the options, and so that they can select the best thing for them at that time. So we help them weigh the pros and cons.
And it's super important because a lot of people don't realize all of the legal implications that are coming about when you're trying to sell a house or retain a house during your divorce process. And so you need to work with someone that's really knowledgeable, that understands not only the logistics of selling a home in the best way possible or finding the best rental property for you, but also what are those implications when it comes to going through your divorce process specifically. I have so many clients that are like, I know a realtor, and it's not saying that realtor would not be a good option, but it is saying what's going to be a really knowledgeable person that you can work with to walk you through this process. Unfortunately, I hear a lot of people say, well, I bought a house before, I've sold a house before, so this is the same thing. It's not the same thing because there's going to be really critical things that you're going to want to look out for, and have your realtor be able to have those conversations with you about the implications during divorce. So I know one thing, Asher, that you said that is like a big pet peeve for you is when realtors tell the buyers that the sellers are getting a divorce. Like, why is that such a big problem?
So
Yeah.
why we don't want to divulge or disclose that information as a listing agent representing a divorced couple, or to a buyer's agent or to the buyer, is because typically they think of that as leverage for themselves and they want to maybe take advantage of that situation. So it's very important that we're always putting our clients in the best light possible. And by telling someone, oh, hey, they're going through a divorce, that's why they're selling, is probably one of the worst things that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been there on the other side of it, where a listing agent has told us as a buyer's agent that they're selling because they're getting divorced and they need to do something very quickly because they need to move on. And when my buyer heard that, they're thinking, okay, well, let's just put a low offer in, let's get a great deal. And that deal was accepted. And I felt terrible for that seller in their position, but their listing agent really opened that door.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of people in my field see, unfortunately, I have a lot of clients that come to me and they just feel a lot of feeling of failure when they're going through their divorce process. They feel like it's become this big thing. It's a lot of family drama, or there's a lot of people in their lives that want to, participate in it or almost pick apart those issues. And at the end of the day, you want someone that you're working with that's going to be professional, that's going to keep your process as private as possible. That's actually one of the big reasons for mediation, is mediating rather than litigating your divorce. It's actually confidential under Arizona law. So it means your process is much more private, and really there's a lot of confidentiality around it to protect what you're looking for in your process and keep those specific details about what happened to yourself. And so I don't think people think of that beyond when they move into like selling their house or those pieces. But as you're saying, it really should remain private and as confidential as possible so that it's not impacting their sales price or anything else in terms of maybe the buyer taking advantage of, we want a bunch of deductions or we want money back because they know you want to get out of the house quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for us as negotiators, how we present our seller's position. We don't want to show that they're needing to sell and they're desperate, but we also don't want to put it out there that they're not very realistic or they don't really care if it does sell. So we have to find that middle ground to make sure that that buyer or that buyer's agent understands that, hey, it doesn't have to be a super good or super bad thing. It's a neutral thing. They've decided to sell their home. They're looking to move into another neighborhood, or they're relocating, whatever it might be, and to present it that way, because I don't see any positivity coming out of my clients are in a desperate situation. They have to sell their home because they're getting divorced. I don't ever see any positivity coming out of that for them by stating that.
No, I don't either. So one thing that I always talk about with my clients is even before we get to that phase of negotiations or selling the house, I get a lot of clients who their biggest question is it ready to sell? So, I have a lot of clients that will put their process on hold because they're like, well, first, from a legal standpoint, I get the question all the time. Can I sell my house while I'm going through a divorce? Yes, as long as you mutually agree, you can do what you want. I think people get really fearful because when they sign their initial petition packet, so the petition is their initial filing. As I tell my clients, what you would initially think when someone says they're filing for divorce, there's this document in there called a preliminary injunction, and it's got all these rules. You can't do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and people kind of freeze. You can do anything you mutually agree to. That's preventing you from doing things that the other person doesn't want you to do. Like you can't list your house without your spouse's knowledge or permission. So you can sell it at any time, but I get a lot of clients that freeze because they're like, is the house ready? Do I need to do updates? they get so overwhelmed with all the things they think they need to do, which is why I love that I can send them to you, because you can walk through and kind of go through that from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a step back there. I mean, if someone's not going through a divorce and things are happy in their life, they got a promotion, they're buying a bigger home, getting their current home ready for sale is already going to be, emotional or stressful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moving, no one really likes moving unless you own a moving company. So, just that portion of it is stressful. And everyone's thinking, okay, is the agent going to come over my home and tell me I have to spend $100,000 in order to really get what I want for it? And all of those things, right? And the time and the energy, the whole thing. So our philosophy is pretty simple, right? There's typically a low end of the market for your neighborhood, for your home. There's the middle ground, and then there's the top echelon, right? And the top echelon is typically something that's brand new and ready to move into, all decked out, upgraded galore. Okay. And when you're dealing with that, we first evaluate their current home, right? Where does it land in regards to the low end, middle ground, or upper end? And if they're looking to get the upper end price point, then we need to make sure that we have to do the things that warrant that price point. They probably are thinking, well, I'm open to doing the upgrades, but maybe he or she isn't. And
Mm-hmm.
we have more to compromise and negotiate on internally, and we still don't even have the house on the market to sell yet.
Right.
Right. So again, we're going to just lay it out and say, hey, you don't have to do anything. Right. We're believers in that. You don't have to do anything, but we want to do maybe the basics, which is cleaning the windows, cleaning the house, decluttering, getting as much natural light in there as possible. So opening up all of the window treatments, maybe changing light bulbs out versus having to repaint and recarpet or refloor or retile the whole house. Right. So we're going to go through the stages with them to make sure it's as easy as possible, because we know what they're going through. If they are open to doing the bigger upgrades, then we can get them to, recommended vendors to get those taken care of, and we can help orchestrate those things. So it's not just us saying, hey, here's a name of someone, let me know when it's done. It's, hey, here's a couple people that you can select from, schedule for them to come in. We can help schedule them, or you can schedule them, and then we can help, orchestrate the entire project if you'd like us to. And there's no additional fee for that. We just do that. That's part of what we provide with getting your home ready for sale.
Which is one of the reasons why I love referring my clients to you, because I think a lot of times in each individual profession, it's not saying it's a bad thing, people tend to kind of stick to their own lane. And so you get a situation where a realtor will walk in and say, okay, I think that you could upgrade the flooring, or I think that you could have this cleaned or this painted, and then kind of let us know when it's done. And so that just puts a lot more pressure on them. Same with my clients is I could just say, okay, you want to sell your house. Great. That's your agreement. I write down the basics, and then they just have to figure it out. The problem is, in either of these situations, selling, moving, a divorce, anything that you're experiencing, which is a big change in your life, it's a lot of stress. You want to be able to have the least amount of stress on your plate as possible. And so what does that look like in terms of being able to provide vendors or other people that can walk you through the process from beginning to end? Because ultimately, if we kind of keep it at this base level of just, oh yeah, you could sell your house, we don't have to do anything, and not giving any information, or in my end, oh yeah, we can just write down that you're selling your house. That just leaves a lot of gaps for conflict or stress to build. And we would like to limit that as much as possible. I know in both of our industries and fields.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine, someone going to you and saying, hey, we want to do this. And if you're like, yeah, we can make that work for you. Here are all the documents to fill out, and let me know when you're done with them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And,
No.
and that's why they're hiring you or I. That's the whole purpose of our existence in these fields. That's why we got into this, to make sure that they're experience is the best it can be, whether they're doing this because they really are excited about it or maybe they're not.
Right. And I think kind of that collaboration is really important, because you brought up a lot of good points. Like, if one person wants to make revisions to the house or changes, but the other doesn't while they're going through the divorce, or one person thinks it's worth it to dump $10,000 into the house to make those changes, and the other person doesn't, or one person thinks it should be listed at $1 million and the other person thinks it should be listed at 700,000. Those are really big cracks or areas of conflict that we see that aren't resolved a lot when people are going through a divorce. So it's really common for a divorce professional to say, okay, you agree you're going to sell your house. Great. When are you listing it for sale? Get a date. You're going to split the equity. Cool. That's it. And there's so many gaps in between where that can fall apart. And so a lot of divorce professionals actually use what are called special masters, where they actually facilitate the entire sale so that the clients don't have to. And that's an expense on their end. And in reality, if you have a team of people, such as when we work together, we can really fill in those gaps. So, you're talking to a client, they go through and husband says, I want to put $10,000 into the house to make changes. And wife is like, that's not happening. You absolutely are going to help them talk through that, but they also can talk through that in mediation, and we can work out solutions for that as they're going through the process, rather than me just walking through it with them. And then 6 months down the line, they come to you and they have a bunch of conflict and you're just stuck with this very vague agreement and you have to figure it all out. Not saying you're not capable, but it's nice to have a team.
I mean, no, teamwork makes the dream work. I mean, just it takes a village sometimes, and it really takes a lot of people to get a lot done when it comes to the example of it, even if they just need 3 different things taken care of at the house, if we're not the ones helping them schedule it, in their mind, they're making this a bigger issue and then they don't take action. So part of what we're doing is we're partnering with them and we're working together on this transaction, right? We're working together on it. So that's why we just help schedule things and we help bring people in. And ultimately, it's up to them, right? If they don't like that person and that vendor, then that's fine. We move on. We get another one in. But if everything's looking good and they know that they can trust them and they feel good with them, then, they begin.
Yeah. And I know that you have a big team on your end that you've created. So you have multiple people, even on your own team, that can help people through their process.
Yes. So when it comes to agents across the valley and the state, we're able to help people, but also definitely there's the vendor relationships that we've, nurtured and grown these relationships for, over almost 13 years now.
Mm-hmm. And you also help not only just in Phoenix, but also in Flagstaff area and Tucson area, right?
Correct. So the whole state we can help people in, and we've actually helped refer agents to other states in the country when they're relocating out to or when they're coming in from.
And that's why it's helpful to me too, because I have a lot of clients that have like vacation homes, such as in Flagstaff. And so they're, working through trying to sell that while they're also trying to manage everything down here. It's just a lot to take on at once. So I think it can always be helpful to have someone that can help you with multiple different areas. Like if you're selling your home here and selling your vacation home in Flagstaff. So you can work with the same team and not have to work with a ton of different people or different companies where you're trying to navigate all of that, because it can be really helpful to line everything up during your process in as productive a way as possible for those sales.
100%. And it depends on the style you like also. So everyone on our team has very similar style of like the go get 'em attitude versus the passive, we'll get to it when we get to it. Yeah. And for whatever reason, and just talking about just the Northern Arizona area, a lot of the Northern Arizona philosophy is more laid back, a little bit slower. And that's why we started venturing up north, because clients of ours had second homes that they wanted to sell or they wanted to purchase. And and they just said, we can't work with anyone up here. It'll take a week for them to even get back to us with a
Yeah.
phone call. So we just, we were like, all right, maybe there's an opportunity there.
Well, and I think it's one, the timing, but two, also saying that, like they ultimately get to pick the final vendor and all of those pieces. In mediation, we like to say that one of the tenets or pillars of mediation is self-determination. And so that's just really key. If somebody wants to be able to like call tomorrow and get everything listed next week, that's a possibility. If they call and they're like, I'm really nervous and I don't know how I feel, and they want to list in 3 months, that's a possibility. Just like in mediation, they could start tomorrow and we could just start working right away. I had a consult last week and they just scheduled for today. I'm like, okay, we're going at a quick pace. And then I have clients who they have a consult and I don't hear for them for 6 months. And they're like, okay, now we're ready. The nice thing is it very much allows you to control your timeline, but you have professionals here to be able to guide you in, okay, you can control your timeline, but here are kind of the things impacting it, like either legally or in the market.
Yeah. And so we've catered a lot of this conversation around like a divorce situation needing to sell a home. And we can touch on it in this episode, or we can wait for a future episode. But what about people that are going through a divorce and they're looking to buy something? Obviously not together.
Mm-hmm.
One of them wants to buy something, or both want to buy something independently. And what does that look like? Because I have a personal example, not going through divorce, but personally selling a home to someone that was going through divorce.
Yep.
And that was not a pretty experience. It ended up okay, but it got rough. And I think part of it was just the lack of maybe that buyer knowing what they could do or they couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to buy something, I think, that, without involving the other person, like, without them knowing about it, but that didn't go very well.
Yeah. So I think some big kind of legal implications of buying or selling your house. As I said, if you mutually agree, you can sell your house. If you mutually agree, someone can use the funds to go out to buy another house. It's just making sure that you're on the same page. A lot of people tend to stop communicating when they go through a divorce process because in a litigated process, so hiring their own attorneys, many attorneys will say, okay, you stop communicating and the attorneys communicate for you. So I can't tell you the number of people, particularly who are in litigation, then call me and say, we want to mediate, who don't want to sit in the same room, haven't had a conversation with their spouse in 6 months, haven't really communicated at all. And so that's a problem because then it prevents one person to be able to move forward with their life because they're not checking in or being able to communicate with the other person. The other thing too is they're just not very aware of the timeline. So kind of going back to that, I've bought or sold a house before. You have, but not with the legal implications of a divorce around you. So as an example, I had a client recently who husband was keeping the home and wife was buying a new home. Great. They agreed to do that, totally fine. The problem is if you do it at specific times, you're going to hit roadblocks. So in this situation, thank goodness for a wonderful mortgage broker who was working on that end because the realtor wasn't communicating with me and neither was the client. And so they put in an offer on a house while she can't close without certain paperwork being finalized. And to be able to get the loan, she has to be able to prove that she has a certain amount of support and that she's not liable for certain debts. Those pieces are really, really important because it almost prevented her from being able to buy her house. And so luckily, the mortgage broker in that situation reached out to me and said, hey, just so you know, this is the close date. This is all the documentation we need. And I'm like, we're not even close to that point. So that's going to be interesting. But that allowed me to then communicate with the clients and say, congratulations, super excited that you're getting a house, but we need to now pick up the pace because you're not going to be able to close on your house on time unless you have certain documentation put into place. I even had a realtor reach out to me for clients recently who said that they weren't comfortable listing the house without having an agreement in place that was signed by both clients saying that they knew they were going through a divorce and that they were both going to sell the house and they were in agreement to that. That's a bit restrictive. I've never seen that frequently, but there's going to be different things put into place, and you can't make those decisions, one, without the other person, and two, you're going to be really restricted on your close of the house if you don't have certain documentation that's put into place already.
Yeah. So a key takeaway here is whether selling or buying and going through a divorce, it's very critical to know the timelines of when you can make those moves. And if you're not strategizing on that with all important parties, such as yourself, when you're, getting things rolling with it, then yeah, that could cost a sale, whether they're selling their home or buying a new home in that process.
Yeah. And it's important for them to think about things in a specific order, even if they plan to retain the house and do a buyout and the other person isn't going to buy something new. So as an example, there's only a specific amount of time that someone can get a buyout from a house. That could be a ton of different options, which we'll go over in future episodes, like refinances and assumptions, or taking out a second mortgage or a home equity line of credit. But I have a lot of clients that kind of have the perspective of like, oh, I can get a buyout tomorrow. And it's like, it's probably going to take like 60 to 90 days for you to get a buyout. And so if someone's depending on that money to be able to close on something or to be able to rent or to be able to move, just really talking through the logistics of things. I like to explain to my clients there's high-end agreements. Those high-level agreements are going to be like, you're going to sell your house or husband's going to keep the house. Then there's all the little sub-agreements that actually affect your day-to-day life. Like, okay, wife is anticipating that she's going to get the buyout and she's going to move in 30 days. That's just not realistically going to happen. There's certain procedures like assumptions of loans that can't even happen until your divorce is finalized. So really setting up that realistic timeline for people, because they have an expectation that something can happen really quickly, and that's not realistic. And so that's not only on my end setting that from a legal perspective, but I also know a lot of clients right now are like, how long is it going to take me to sell my house? What does the market look like? I had a client just yesterday say, oh, we'll just list it for sale October 1st and we'll get the cash out by November 1st. And I'm like, I think you should talk to Asher because I don't think that's what the market looks like right now.
And that leads exactly, where we wanted to go with this too, is just, how do you time things? Because some clients, right, they're going through a divorce and they want to time everything perfectly, where that's not really a realistic thing. There's no perfect timing to get a divorce and to sell a home.
Yeah.
Right. And if they've agreed that this is the time they want to divorce, and this is the time they want to sell their home, then we're going to create the best, experience we can for them, with the least impact, negative impact. Right. I mean, that's really all we can do. We need to know the timeframes that we're working with on the divorce. We need to make sure we're getting the house ready and making sure it looks like it's the best it can look with the best light possible, and just get it out there and keep the communication going. One thing that we do really well, when people are going through divorce and selling a home for them, is communicating with both of them and them individually. And what that looks like is when it comes to the home sale, they want to be communicated at the same time, both of them all together, right? Here's the updates, here's how many showings, here's the feedback. But then where are they going, right? Where are those two people going if they're both selling the home? Is one going to buy something? Is one going to rent something? Are they both going to rent something? And on that communication level, they don't want the other party to really always know where they're going and what they're doing. So we've learned a while ago that, we have to keep that communication channel independent from the party, but the sale of the home has to be all together because that's what's fair and just. And, they're both selling the home. So again, there are these little things that we just do. It's not something that we just brought on. It's something that we do that the clients really appreciate, when they're going through a sensitive time like this.
And I think it's perfect that you mentioned, there's no like perfect timing for anything. That being said, looking into these options sooner than later is best. So, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, which again is completely normal, you're so overwhelmed. People don't know what they're doing during their divorce process. And so they're just trying to get through the legal process. But those all have implications on one another. So how I like to explain to my clients is like a jigsaw puzzle. I understand not everyone loves a jigsaw puzzle, but running with the analogy, if you poured out all the pieces to a jigsaw puzzle to put it together, you don't just try and shove all the pieces together. Like that's just not efficient. You're not going to get anywhere trying to do everything at once. You have to flip over the pieces, see what there is, and then connect each piece at a time. But the biggest mistake that I see people make is you would never put a jigsaw puzzle together and then walk away and not make sure it matches the front of the box. Like that was a lot of time and effort to make sure it actually worked. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. They check all the boxes. Oh, I'm going to do this with my house, this with parenting, this with support, but they don't actually step back to see if it makes sense together. And that can have a really negative impact because just as an example with a house alone, parenting time, all parents agree to parenting time, but then they don't have the capacity, they don't have the space to actually have parenting time with their kids. So how do we handle that? Or a house sale or keeping a home. Maybe it's agreed that one spouse is going to keep the home, but they can't afford it without having support agreements. They get support agreements and they're like, okay, well, now I can afford it. We don't know if that's actually true. There needs to be an actual analysis run on different loan options. We need to see what you can actually afford. And so unfortunately, I get a lot of calls a year down the line from people that I didn't work with who say, my agreements don't work. Can we fix them now? And it's like, we really can't. So it's really helpful to start talking about these things up front. Like if I have a client who says, I think that I want to sell my house, I immediately send them to Asher and we're at square one. Like we haven't even done anything yet because, or I think I'm going to rent, or I want to see what it looks like to, keep my house and the other person moves out. We need to know what those things look like up front so that people can make knowledgeable decisions. Otherwise, you're making decisions not knowing what you're actually making a decision based on, or if it's actually going to work long term.
And you need enough time to digest, and they need enough time to analyze the assessment. Because if it's not just a one conversation thing most of the time when it's a big asset like a home, and they need just that time, that time. I love the jigsaw concept. I love it because I sometimes use that as well in regards to the process, right? And it could feel overwhelming when you open up. And it's just so funny that you also use jigsaws because like just a puzzle, right? Because like here's the puzzle, we're dumping it out on the table and it feels overwhelming.
Yep.
And I love how you're like, well, first flip them right side up, right?
Yeah.
Pieces. I usually just start with we always start with the border and we know, okay, here is the frame work that we have. And then once we start putting it together, then we actually can start seeing what this is all about. And that's that is the process. The first time I come over someone's home, it's like I'm just dumping out a puzzle on the table and it could feel overwhelming. But my goal is always before I leave that at least the border is set up and we have a pretty good framework in regards to how we're going to work together, what the process is like. So there's more comfort for them to move forward and to help them make their decision. Because I'm a big believer in holding the real estate if you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll talk them out of listing have me sell their home. I'd rather have them keep it if they can.
Yeah, as an investment property.
Yeah, I mean, wealth is built around there, and I think that's a great thing to keep if they're able to. And if they're not, we're going to get them the most we can, and they'll be able to, eventually buy in the future, whatever their goal is.
Yeah. And I think, for a majority of my clients, they're going to end up selling a home or one person will retain the home with a buyout, just because for most people, your house is your biggest asset. But if you have the flexibility to not need to do that, then you have the option of I'll even have clients who keep a home jointly as a joint business, as a rental property together. And so then it's not one person or the other. That's particularly helpful in cases where I've had clients who, were underwater on their mortgage. And so like, why sell it? Or they saw it as a business opportunity and they're like, oh, well, we'll take cash out for ourselves later on it and all of those pieces. I've even had clients keep their properties like for their kids. So it can be an investment, but it can also be something that's a legacy or inheritance. So I love the analogy of the border of the puzzle, because, I think in both of our fields, we're both really thoughtful about like there's a order and structure to things. So what I always tell my clients is ultimately they get to control the timeline, they get to control their agreements, but I really control the process because there is a really logical structure to things. So even as a simple example, I like talking to my clients about their kids before we talk about finances, because I joke that if we talk about finances first, it's like you put dollar sign sunglasses on and now all you can see your kids through is the finances. And that's not how we want to be reaching agreements. We want it to be really thoughtful about their family and their family dynamics before we worry about finances. Or I'll have clients that are really worried about support. Like, what is child support going to be? Well, we can't actually run the child support calculator until we know what your parenting time looks like and a bunch of other agreements. So there's very much a structure to things, but I think that's really helpful for people because it's very overwhelming. You throw all the puzzle pieces out and it's like, where do you start? You start with the border and the structure, and then they can work within that. So they feel like they actually have tasks that they're completing and time to work through those pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually, I love that you also say the timing piece of, like giving them the time to work through things. In mediation in my office, we meet for 2 hours at a time. And the reason we do that is one, your brain is fried at the end of 2 hours. No one likes me. They don't like each other. It's fine. I tell them that you don't have to like me at the end of 2 hours. But a lot of people will go to mediation and it's half day or full day. And I'm like, how do you have time to think or to consider or to work through things? I always tell clients, if we work through an issue and they can't reach an agreement, okay, we put it on the shelf. It'll come back down eventually. We can't throw it away or get rid of it, but you at least have time to think about it. And that's where having like vendors or resources can be really helpful between those meetings, than to go out and say, okay, what does it actually look like to sell your house before we move forward on making these agreements? So they're actually practical and can be followed.
Yeah. Like when buying a home, we try to max it out to 5 homes we're going to go look at one time. Because after that, even with 5 for a first-time home buyer, right? They're already going through something emotional.
Yeah.
You go to 5 homes, it starts blending together. Like, did that one have the pool, or that? They're like, hold on, the yellow wall, or or the one with the carpet. Like they start forgetting, and it's not their fault. It's like they're going into this the first time. They're already going through some sort of life event, and by creating these systems and processes that we both have done in our fields, that's why the experience is so great. And sometimes the clients don't even understand that, because they don't have anything else to compare it to. Hopefully they don't have anything else to compare it to because they already haven't gone through a divorce.
Right.
But for my example, like they've probably bought a home in the past, and sometimes they don't know why the experience is better. They just like the experience. And it's because of these things that we've set up and things that you've set up to make sure, like the 2-hour limit versus a half a day. I mean, that could be the differentiator between someone having a better experience or not, right there. That could be it. Right. And there are, things that could change those systems and processes, right? If someone is experienced in buying a home and they're in town for a very short amount of time and we have to get into maybe 10 homes at once, okay, obviously, like we're going to work with you.
Right.
Just like if you had someone that, things are moving really well and they're pretty good at the communication, maybe you go more
Yeah.
than 2 hours. I mean,
Oh yeah, it'll be like we're wrapping up the second hour and we're doing really well, and I have time on the calendar. I'm like, do you have time? I have time. Okay, let's just keep the ball moving.
right. And so there's like always times of change that could happen during those, circumstances in a good way. But yeah, I mean, that's why like having the framework there, it just makes things easier to digest, right? Like they're taking smaller bites out of this big thing that we're doing.
Yeah. Or doing a frame on a puzzle.
There we go. There we go. Got the borders up. So
well, I think we might be out of time today, but we'll be covering all of these issues in more depth in all of our future episodes, including inviting some guest hosts and speakers to come and talk about their areas of expertise as well.
And if you have any questions in regards to something we haven't covered yet, please feel free to comment, reach out to us so we can include that in one of the episodes.
Looking forward to seeing everybody in the future. Have a great day.
Have a good day.